This is Twit.
Getty images are now free to use for bloggers. Getty's concluded that it can't stop people from stealing its pictures and using them online, so instead, the company is enabling the free use of about 35 million pictures for what it calls non-commercial uses. Selected pictures have a new embed button that shows code, which bloggers and others can then paste into their blogs or sites, and the result is an image that's still hosted on Getty. The picture, the physical, well, the file is actually on the Getty servers and displayed on the blog or site, and then Getty branding is visible just below the picture, along with buttons for Twitter and Tumblr for some reason. So Joshua Benton is a journalist and writer, and he's also the director of the Nieman Journalism Lab at Harvard University, which he founded in 2008. Welcome.
Hi.
So how does the process from, say, a blogger's perspective for adding one of these pictures, how does that work?
Well, it's an embed. Think of it like a YouTube embed, for example. It is you go to the site, you find the photo that you want, you make sure that it's an embeddable, because a lot of the photos that Getty has are not embeddable. And then from there, you essentially get an iframe that you can paste into a WordPress post or a Blogspot post or whatever else. So it's not the easiest form in a sense. You have to be on a platform that allows you to use iframes, which not every public platform does, and it does leave what you're seeing now, the Getty Images logo underneath it and the sharing tools. So it's not quite as clean as just copying and pasting an image, but it does mean that this enormous wealth of photography is now open to be used on lots of corners of the web. The same sorts of things that you might previously have gone to Flickr to get a Creative Commons image for, or maybe gone to something like iStock Photo, which is also owned by Getty, to buy something for $10. Now you might be able to just have a really high quality photo and use it without any money changing hands.
Now it's still really, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jill.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you bring up Creative Commons, because Creative Commons really pushed to become a standard in having more open, shareable sources on the web, especially for images. And I think what Getty is doing is trying to monetize in a way that Creative Commons really wouldn't do. Can you talk a little bit about that monetization process for Getty?
Sure. I mean, they haven't announced what their monetization plans are going to be, but if you look at the terms of service, they do explicitly say that they are reserving the right to gather whatever data they want from the usage of these photos, where they're posted, what the content is. You can imagine all sorts of targeting things they could do from that. And they specifically say at any point we can start putting ads up on this, and you as the site owner can't do anything about it. Presumably you could take the image down. But I think the plan, if there is one, is that they would like to get these photos out on the free web, on the blogosphere, on Tumblr, to get them out as far as they can. And one would imagine that a few months, years from now, they might flip a switch and say, there's now going to be, a YouTube-style small banner across the bottom 90 pixels of the photo, or maybe it could be something like the image equivalent of a pre-roll ad. Maybe you see an ad first and you click on it and then see the image. You can imagine some of the possibilities, and you can imagine publishers not being too excited about them. But yeah, they're not doing this because they're a charity. They derive enormous economic value from these photos by selling them to publishers like the New York Times or CNN or others. I think this is essentially a play to try and get some revenue from the sector of the market that might otherwise now only copy and paste photos and just see a photo on the web, assume that they have the rights to post it on their own platform, and do it. When that happens, Getty doesn't get anything. This way, they think they can get some branding influence, and they can maybe eventually monetize it with advertising. At
first glance, it seems like a great thing. It's like, free photos, this is going to be great. But in fact, people who are comfortable stealing Getty photos, I think are going to probably still do it. It's super convenient to steal photos, whereas this thing is problematic in a bunch of ways. Some of them you mentioned, which is the possibility of ads in the future, the fact that Getty continues to control the image. They can do anything they want with it, including revoking it, and they can do it a year later, so you may not even notice it on your blog. The other issues are that you can't resize the images. You have this big Getty ad under every picture. You have those buttons there. It's kind of problematic, and I just don't see anybody embracing this. I mean, the people who are sensitive about the rights of images, first of all, they're an extreme minority among bloggers, and second of all, they're going to find lots of low-cost or free sources for images. I guess the only advantage is that for the people who are willing to and who want to pay for images, Getty images are actually really great. But I mean, do you see this changing really, the amount of theft that goes on by bloggers of Getty images?
I could imagine that there would be a small subset of publishers for whom the availability of a legal alternative, a completely legally clear option, might be interesting. I don't think it's going to take over the image web. It's not going to integrate with what we see on the web to that great of an extent, and that's in part because Getty's trying to walk this very fine line. On one hand, they don't want to make the service so easy to use and so flexible and so pleasant that the paying customers that they already have would be tempted to abandon writing that check every month or every year and to start using these embeds in their place. They don't want to be that good, but they also want to be good enough that they are interesting and useful to the people who are currently lifting images or who are using kind of so-so Flickr Creative Commons images where they might be able to use a better Getty image, for example. So trying to accomplish those two goals is really hard. You know, in a sense, they're trying to do what Apple did with the iTunes Music Store. You know, take people who were previously using Napster or Kazaa or whatever file sharing network they were using, and provide an alternative that, yes, it does cost you money, but it's also easier. It's also, you know, that the file is going to be a valid file. You're not going to get arrested. You're not going to get sued by the RIAA. It's trying to add that amount of convenience. I don't think they've hit that midpoint properly. And I'm with you. I don't anticipate that if we talk in a year, we're going to be amazed at how many Getty embeds have taken over publishing online.
Do you think it's going to affect the industry? In other words, will competitors to Getty follow suit and do something similar?
It's possible. I think they're going to be watching it very closely. You know, their economic interests have already been impacted by things like Creative Commons, things like iStock Photo, owned by Getty, and other things that have tried to eat at the bottom end of the market and bring down some of the pricing pressure to lowering prices. I think if I were a competitor, I would want to see whether it's going to get any uptake, because it's a risk for Getty. It's not a huge risk because, again, I think they've made it clunky enough that they're not really threatening their paying customers. And if they do achieve some sort of scale, then that advertising model is at least interesting. I have to think, though, if in a year or 2 years they turn on the ads, they would be facing a giant rebellion from everyone who publishes on the internet. And in general, you don't want to anger everyone who publishes on the internet. So I'm skeptical about it working out in the end. But nonetheless, it's a very bold move, and you have to sort of appreciate that they're thinking of doing something that really is shaking up the industry a bit.
Well, one of the things the advertising industry counts on is changing the acceptance of where ads appear. I mean, if you look at what's happened on video over the last 2 or 3 years, people are willing to accept all kinds of things. So who knows? Maybe we'll all accept ads. Maybe that'll become kind of an industry standard, and by the time they get around to doing it. So who knows? We'll be watching it very carefully. And I want to thank you, Joshua, for coming on and explaining this issue to us.
Thank you.
You can find Joshua Benton at joshuabenton.com and on Twitter at jbenton.